Green Party candidate Jill Stein was on MSNBC over the weekend, and to nobody's surprise, she was accused of being a puppet of a nefarious Russian plot. Let's watch, and then I'll break it down.
Robert Mueller. That indictment came out and your name was mentioned in there. I do want to play a soundbite that you may have heard earlier. It was from our blast block. It's John Podesta, of course, from the Clinton campaign. And here's what he said today. Take a listen to this.
They were pushing votes, just to give one example, to Jill Stein. Her vote in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin was greater than the gap Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in those states. So you can't prove that it did affect the outcome, but it certainly seems likely that it had some impact.
So, while we may never know precisely whether these efforts played a role in the outcome of the election, when we look at 3 of the states that Russia targeted, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania being among those that they targeted, Pennsylvania as well, if I didn't say that, is it plausible that these Russian actors created enough influence that changed a few thousand votes here and there, and ultimately that could have altered the election?
So let me say the assumption here is that the votes belong to Hillary Clinton and that that my votes were stolen from someone else. And I think that's an insult to American voters who really deserve to choose, who made it perfectly clear that they did not like. In fact, these were the most distrusted and disliked candidates in recorded history. So to try to excuse my votes as being stolen from Hillary is outrageous. But beyond that, we have data. We actually have scientific data on how people voted. And what we know is that the people who voted for me, in vast majority, over 60%, would not have voted if I wasn't there. And of the remainder who would vote, many of them would have gone to Donald Trump. So just asserting that those votes belong to Hillary is just another sign of the arrogance of the Democratic establishment, which is really working overtime here to silence its opposition. And if you look at the smear campaign that's actually been conducted against me about being a Russian tool, when did that get started? Remember, my trip based on foreign policy, on a peace offensive, on addressing nuclear weapons and the climate crisis.
You were speaking against the war, yep, while you were there.
Absolutely, and trying to promote nuclear disarmament and really substantive climate emergency action, talking not only to Russian media and officials. On that same trip, I spoke to the deputy lead negotiator for China at the climate talks. I spoke with Jeremy Corbyn, the head of the Labour Party in the UK. So these are really critical issues. And I'd say what's wrong with our elected officials that this is not on their agenda.
Very important issues. We've discussed them before on this broadcast. But do you think,
to your
Doctor,
credit, absolutely,
that by being there, perhaps did your presence there maybe uptick their concept of interfering using you?
We're through the looking glass on this stuff now. I mean, it's really maddening. So they bring her on. The whole point of bringing her on is to be like, hey, weren't you really responsible for Donald Trump? Isn't it? Didn't you make it so that you're the spoiler in the election and Hillary would have won if it wasn't for you and if it wasn't for Russian propaganda? Isn't that what's really going on here, Jill? Say it, Jill. Say it. That's the whole point of them bringing her on. So as Jill Stein brings up, the first point on that is stop acting like the default position is that Hillary is entitled to those votes if Jill didn't get them. Because that's the argument. The argument is, well, obviously, if you weren't in, all those votes would have went to Hillary. But that's not true. In fact, we do have specific numbers on this. According to the exit polls, if Stein voters were forced to pick between Trump or Hillary, only 35% were for Hillary. Only 35%. That's it, not even half. 10% would have voted for Trump, and then 55% wouldn't vote at all. So given those facts, Jill Stein simply did not swing the election. It's just a fact. She just didn't. It's just a fact. If you take the words of the people who voted for Jill Stein, which why wouldn't you, instead of you superimposing onto them what you think they would have done or should have done if Jill wasn't in the race. Instead of doing that, just fucking listen to them. And they tell you only 35% of them would have voted for Hillary. And so she wouldn't have been able to win. And on top of all that, this is such a stupid conversation we're having anyway. 9% of Democrats voted for Donald Trump. But they want to shame the third-party voters. Why? Very simple. Because you got to fucking fall in line and pick between the establishment candidates. That's the message. Shut the fuck up, fall in line, and pick between the two candidates. Stop being a petulant child, voting for the candidate that you agree with more on the policy substance. What the fuck are you doing? Fall in line and vote for one of the two candidates. That's the underlying argument here. And the effect of these indictments. Now, we just went over the indictments in detail, and I do think it's a nuanced picture. So I think Mueller's correct he's charging some of these people with identity theft, bank fraud. Okay, these are real crimes, and you can and should go after them for that, because we can't have people stealing other people's identities. And so go after them for that, sure. But the reaction from corporate media and establishment Democrats has been beyond insufferable, and the consequences of how this is being used, it's maddening. You have a common position that people say willy-nilly this is Pearl Harbor. This is like Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor? There were fucking Twitter trolls. They go, no, it's like Pearl Harbor, so it's like an attack on us. Well, how the fuck did we respond to Pearl Harbor? What happened? What's a fucking war? Is that what you want? You want to go to war? You want to go to war over goddamn Twitter trolls, you fucking idiots? But that's what it is. So they're using this to move to the right on foreign policy, as they've been all along. That's one of the effects of Russiagate. And it's being used domestically to silence the left and tell them to fucking fall in line. And that's not conjecture on my part. That's a fact. I mean, again, I've gone over this a million times with you, but the Facebook algorithm has been changed to deprioritize all news. You have the YouTube and Google algorithm has been changed to deprioritize independent outlets and push establishment outlets. You have crackdowns on social media. Twitter has, hundreds of thousands of Russian bots they've purged from the site. Well, guess what? We know that they weren't all Russian bots. Some of the people who I follow, who I know, were fucking axed as if they were Russian bots. They're like, I'm not a fucking Russian bot. What are you doing? Because it is a new version of McCarthyism and a Red Scare. It's being used to crack down. They're saying, as a result of these indictments, hey, the Russians helped Jill Stein and Bernie Sanders too. Why haven't they spoken out against this? Hey, it seems to me like they're not speaking out against this. What are they hiding? This is exactly... Do you know anybody who's Russian? Have you ever known anybody who's Russian? It's kind of questionable that you're not... Why are you not more aggressive in speaking out on this? This is exactly what a Red Scare looks like. And so instead of the Democratic Party civil war being waged at the moment, instead of the left in that civil war sweeping the board in victories, which is what would happen if it was a fair fight, because our policy ideas are better, our substance is on point, we're for Medicare for all, we're for free college, we're for a living wage, we're for ending the wars, we're for a New Deal, we're for fighting climate change. We would win if it was on the policy substance against the neoliberals and the corporatists. But now this is being used as, no. Draw a clean line and just assert that everybody who's actually on the left is outside of the realm of debate and discussion, and they're so crazy you can't even allow them in the room, and we'll have the Democratic Civil War is now a narrow fight between one wing of corporatists and another wing of corporatists. So that's the only way they could win this civil war, is to just declare that all the people who are right are not even allowed in the room and not even part of the civil war because they're so fucking crazy that they're Putin stooges. That's how this is being used, and if you don't see it, you're fucking blind.